By the way, Menachem is my dear friend, just to get the record straight. And I'm very impressed with him, and count it as a blessing that I've been able to get to know you. So thank you for that opportunity. Okay, well, first of all, let's play a little bit of Jewish geography. I heard somebody stand up and say that made a reference to Jewish geography. So Horowitz, right? First name? Brian. So I'm at the home opener for the Philadelphia Flyers, which I'm a rabid fan. And I'm there with my brother. I go every year to the home opener with my brother, and we're brothers, you know. So I'm 60, he's 63, and we're still brothers like we were 12, 11, and 10, and we're doing different things. And a text comes across to my phone from somebody I have no idea who it is. Do you know who it is? Okay.
I was sitting next to him.
Oh, you were? Okay. And he makes some type of reference to, sit down and stop your antics or something like that. He was much more polite than that, but essentially that's what he said. So I'm trying to figure out who it is, and the number looks familiar, and I look down, and I say, okay, finally, all right, who is this? Then he tells me that he played golf with me at Pine Valley, which I've had the honor and the privilege for a 20-plus handicap to play there. That's pretty cool. And then he identifies who he is, and he says, and by the way, I've encouraged my son to go and hear you speak tomorrow. Like, how would he even know that I was speaking anywhere? So that was your dad, right? Okay. It's also interesting, Menachem, that the list that the mailing list you have to put out for these speaking engagements, I must have gotten about a dozen calls from people I haven't talked to in 5 years, 10 years, 12 years, all on your list, and all saying very flattering things. So I thought that was kind of cool. I thought I heard somebody from Janie Montgomery. Who was that over there? So as you'll hear, I'll tell you a little bit about my story and my background. One of the things that I've been fortunate enough to do is take a company public in the late 90s, a company called Access Resources, which is a staffing company. I noticed there were a lot of staffing firms represented here. I don't know if that's because I'm the speaker or just because that's what you all happen to be doing. But there was a time, I don't know how long you've been at Janney, but Michael Muffson was the lead partner that decided to invest in my firm to travel around the country and see if we could do a roll-up of firms like mine and take it out public. And we were quite successful, actually. So I'm always grateful when I hear Janie Montgomery in the room. I thought I also heard a quad. I got a lot of Jewish networking here, don't I? A quad 56. Where was that? Right. Now, do you know how I'm connected to you?
In many different ways, but yes.
Well, the way we're connected there is that at the staffing company that I had, we had 4 women that were superstars in that organization. And after we took Access public and we moved on to other things, the 4 of them left and they started a firm called Quad 56. And no, 656, right? I'm sorry, I don't want to misrepresent. And they're one of the top staffing firms in accounting, finance. You probably do some other things too now, right?
Insurance, IT, HR.
Right. And they've built quite a thriving little business. I'm very proud of them, and it's great to see their offspring here, so to speak. Anyway, anybody else know me? I don't know. Ah, now that's an honor. All right. Okay. So I happen to have a few things to say. So, of course, you know, Menachem says, hey, Ed, would you do me a favor? I'd like you to be able to speak at this group. And by the way, it's in a couple of weeks. Of course, I'll do it, Menachem. I forgot to ask him, you know, what the topic ought to be. And so I never did ask him. So you're going to get potluck today, okay? And hopefully there'll be, you know, a few nuggets of value to you. And you'll get to know a little bit about me. I really got a. Did we get that published, by the way, Menachem? The title? 90%, 9%, 1%. Did you guys all hear that? Okay. So maybe you're wondering what that is. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and hopefully we'll be able to get into a conversation about that. And I'll tell you a little bit about my personal journey, and hopefully some of you won't fall asleep as you hear it. Okay, so I kind of divide the world into the 90%ers, the 9%ers, and the 1%ers. And the fact is, every one of you is not just a 90%er, or a 9%er, or a 1%er. Sometimes you're a 90%er, sometimes you're a 9%er, and every once in a while, you're a 1%er. Okay, so what am I talking about? Well, the way, in my opinion, my humble opinion, the way the world is shaped is that it's driven by the 1%ers. The 1%ers are those people that don't look at the world the way it is. As John F. Kennedy said, we look at the world the way it could be, right? And 1%ers see things that aren't in the confines of the box of the world that they live in and the things they do. They don't necessarily abide by the protocol and the norm of society. 1%ers can be good or bad people. They don't necessarily have to be good people, but they're definitely people that impact and influence the world and change the way the world thinks. I like to quote Martin Luther King when I talk about the 1%ers. There's a guy in 1963 in Alabama stood up and said that one day I have a dream, maybe not there he said that speech, but I have a dream that one day we'll be judged by the content of our character, not by the color of our skin. It's a good thing he had a few hundred people around him because he probably would have been hung right then and there for making a speech in that period of time in that portion of the country. And yet if you look around today, the world is significantly changed. And yes, we still have issues around race in this country, but boy, what a difference from 1963. And that's because one man stood up and saw the world differently than everybody else, and probably was stupid enough to think that he could affect a change. It takes great courage to be a 1%er, and it takes sometimes stupidity to be a 1%er. So the 9%ers are a very interesting group of people. They don't quite have kind of the courage or the creative energy or the juice to step out and open up a new area, a new thought, a new process, a new arena, but they know they want to be there. And they're smart enough to recognize who the 1%ers are. And so what they do is they attach themselves to the 1%ers. Truth be told, the 1%ers can never get anything accomplished in life if it weren't for the 9%ers. Because the 9%ers are the ones that execute on the crazy and the wacky ideas that the 1%ers have. And without the 9%ers, the 1%ers can't exist. The 90%ers, they're the folks that want to have stability. They want to have direction. They want to live in a secure world. They want to follow direction. They want to have their world shaped. They want the agenda lined up. And they want to know where they're going in the morning. They want to have stability of income, stability of family, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of wonderful attributes in the 90%ers that go along with that world. Now, the downside is that the 90%ers are not going to step out and do anything that's going to impact their world or the world around them, and they're not going to effectuate change. But if change is in the air and that change becomes popular, then those 90%ers adhere to that. Without getting too political, I think there's a lot of social and moral events that are taking place in the world, and I marvel and notice how they've come into the public domain and become popular, and how the 90%ers have now gravitated towards an adoption of a new wave of direction, et cetera. It's very, very interesting process. So part of what I want to talk to you today about is, who are you? Are you a 90%er? And like I said, there's many aspects of being 90%ers that are wonderful and important. I've been married for almost 31 years. I have 4 kids. I've really had primarily 2 companies or 2 businesses, each now running 17 years in nature. And I'm very comfortable and proud of those things, and those are very important anchors in my life. So, are you a 90%er? And if so, what part of your life is the 90%? And then, who are the 90%ers? And I particularly want to address the young people in, what are we calling them, Menachem? Young professionals, and even the young not professionals. So the young professionals and non-professionals, I'd like to address you, because you've got your runway ahead of you. You've got the whole world ahead of you, and it's exciting. It's scary. I'm not sure if those of us that are over 50 or over 55 would look around at you and say that we're proud of the way we've left the world for you. But the exciting part is that you have an opportunity to change the world. I'm be 61 soon. Kind of was at the very edge of being a devout hippie, and we actually believed in the 60s, in the late 60s and early 70s. We actually believed that we could bring love and peace to the world, and we were fiercely committed to it, and we believed that it could happen. In the late 60s and early 70s, probably the first time in 100 years that there was such a creative explosion of technology, of music, of the arts. There was an explosive period of time, and we had a wonderful opportunity, which I, think is past. We were excited as a generation about what we could do. We could put a man on the moon. For the professionals, what are we calling them again? Young professionals. The young professionals and the young not so professionals. You think this is like no big deal to be able to put a man on the moon. Well, this was just an unbelievable accomplishment. And yet you have the same opportunity in your generation to take this world to better or for worse. And so I challenge you. Are you a 1%er? Are you a 9%er? Or are you a 90%er? I don't believe that the 90%ers can effectuate change in the world. I believe the 1%ers create the creative opportunities to do so, and I believe that the 9%ers are the ones that execute. But you need courage, okay? You need courage. And the interesting thing about what you're capable of is that you're capable of doing more than you think you can. So I'm going to volunteer 2 volunteers to just kind of prove my point a little bit. Would you be so kind as to come up? I'd like to have you come up if you wouldn't mind. Yeah, you. And the good news is I'm going to assign you a beautiful young lady to help you in this experiment. Michelle, would you come up? Okay. Come on up. take somebody from the family. And I'm sorry I didn't get your name.
Tori.
Tori, come on up, Tori. You're over here, though. Okay. Right over here. Okay. You two are going to be my markers. You're over there.
Okay.
And we're going to just do a little bit of an experiment here to kind of prove my point, okay? Now what I'm going to ask both of you two to do, you got to give him some room. He needs room. Just put your hands out like this, as far as you can, right, with a pointer. Okay? You too. And it's actually more important that you're going to do this than it is for him.
Well, I haven't agreed to it yet.
Well, I pray that you will, but I could cut you at any moment, so it's okay.
That's fine.
It's
I am either a 9 or a 1.
Now here's what I'm going to ask you guys to do, okay? With your pointer, I'm going to ask you to keep your feet still, and don't do it yet,
Okay.
and turn your body as far behind you as you can, and mark a spot on the wall, mentally, okay? I'm going to ask our markers then to get as close to that spot as possible and point it out, okay? So we can do that, right?
Yes.
But you got to give yourself a little room so you don't bang
Okay.
the equipment there, okay? So here we go. We're going to go. Ready? Here we go. As far back as you can.
Okay.
You got the spot?
Yes.
All right, ladies, please keep the spot. Keep the spot.
Okay.
All right, now find the spot. Is that where you're pointing to, or is she?
Oh,
over
I
there?
was supposed to point.
Yes.
Okay. Fine.
You got your spot?
Yes.
Does she have your spot?
No.
Which way? This way?
Yes.
Come on,
Towards
this
you.
way, Michelle.
No. Close.
Okay. It could be just general. That's close enough if it's close.
It's pretty close.
Okay, hold that spot, Michelle. Okay, we got the same thing here. You got your spot?
Yeah.
Tori, does he have this? Does she have a spot? Okay, come. Don't move your feet. Come back to the same spot. Okay. Now, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. What is this guy doing? Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I want you to do the exact same thing I just asked you to do. Okay, but I want you to see how far past the spot that Tori and Michelle have pointed on the wall you can go past. Okay?
I don't understand what that means.
I want you to do the same thing, just go past the point that you had before as far as you can.
Do it again.
Just do it again.
Put your arms out.
Just do it, go as far as you can past that now. Past that.
Fine.
Okay. All right? You got yours as far as you can go?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, I believe you were over here somewhere, right? Around here some? Here? There?
Approximately.
All right.
Yeah,
Not
but
bad.
I
She
moved
can't
my
reach.
feet, someone said, so I don't know. I'm
All right,
not good
and
at
you're
directions.
about over here, right? Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciate what you did. Ladies, thank you so much. Well, what did we learn just now? That he's, not cooperative? Perhaps. We learned that a little bit. No, I'll tell you, we learned something extraordinary. We learned something extraordinary. If you remember, what I asked each of those guys to do is to turn their body and find a spot as far as they could go and mark it on the wall. And they did that. Sir, what is your name?
I'm John Ford.
John went significantly past, 30–40% past his point, and Scott went about probably 20% past where he went. And I think that's an interesting correlation between the human soul and the human ability to accomplish things. We can always go farther than we think that we can go. And we set our own limitations based on ourselves. Our limitations in life are self-contained. Now, I particularly picked John and Scott to represent the over 50 crowd and the under 30 crowd, right? Because the fact of the matter is, that age is not an issue in this exercise. That one shouldn't think that because you're in your 50s or your 60s and you've accomplished and set where you want to be in life and what you want to do, and you've kind of made your decisions in your late 20s and your early 30s, who you're going to marry, where you're going to work, what your career is going to do, who your friends are going to be, that you're now just playing out your life. It's not true. It's not true. It's only true if you limit yourself to that experience. So I think the main thing that I want to leave you with today, and don't worry, I'm not done yet. I know you're upset about that. I'm going to go back and tell you a little bit about my personal story. But I want to say, several times during my time together with you, I encourage you to challenge yourself at any age, at any station in life, and wherever you find yourself, that there is an opportunity for you to reach beyond yourself and become more than you think that you can be. And I believe that when you reach beyond yourself, you release energy. And energy is life. And life is enthralling. It's electric. And we all live for those moments when we can have electricity in our lives and fulfillment and excitement. And I don't mean the kind when you're driving 90 miles an hour down the road or you're in a casino somewhere. I'm talking about the rich and deep kind of excitement that wells up inside your soul and blesses you and blesses those around you. So 90%, 9%, 1%. Each one of us are all of those things. I challenge you today to think about how much more you can move the dial in the 1% in your life. Okay? All right, so I thought I would talk a little bit about that because that's something meaningful to me, and I try to live my life along those lines. And so I thought I would just give you a little bit of history on my life and how it's played out, and hopefully you'll find a blessing or two, locked away in there. And I thought I would do it in reverse order. I thought I'd start from the top and go to the bottom instead of coming from the bottom and going to the top. So as Menachem said, and my bio says, I'm the founder and the CEO of a $120 million plus company. Maybe it's 130 by now, Menachem. Thank you for the extra 10 million. But that literally was founded out of my house in April of 1999. I planned it. I'd come from a company that I had just taken public. I had a few dollars, not a lot actually, but I had a few dollars, but I had a vision for what I wanted to do. And I started the company, planned it all out, and opened up an office in Atlanta and in Philadelphia on the same day, simultaneously. I started out as a staffing company, and in that world, not on the search side, but on the temp staffing business, companies tend to, and I know there's a lot of staffing folks in the room, so you'll understand this. They tend to buy or rent people from you, usually what I call high labor, low skill. So high labor, low skill implies a lower billable hour. So we were in the accounting and finance space. We billed at about $35 to $50 an hour. And about 25 years ago, actually, 20 years ago, I began to see that there was going to be an increased demand in the marketplace in the field that we were in for higher, more complex skill sets. It really wasn't a market that was established at the time. There were the staffing firms, and then there were the big four firms and the strategy firms like Bain, like PricewaterhouseCoopers, and firms such as those that were $100 to $400 an hour bill rates at that time. There was nothing really kind of in the middle for experienced people with more complex skill sets that companies didn't have that talent on the inside. And I felt that I saw an opportunity coming a little bit ahead of its time, and I wanted to go there. And so in my former company, Access, I created a division called ABC, Access Business Consultants, to address that marketplace. Now, what we ended up doing in that company is we merged together 7 or 8 firms. I was the president and chief operating officer of that firm. as a public entity. We had a CEO, an attorney who had done a lot of merger and acquisition work, and the two of us took the company public. We ended up buying about 12 or 13 companies and grew that to about $165 million before it was sold to a larger staffing firm. Now, the CEO and I didn't get along. His world, and he was a young lawyer, no operating experience whatsoever. His idea was, let's grow, let's just grow the company by buying other companies, and if we buy some dogs, we'll just buy another one to cover over the dog that we bought, and we'll just keep going that. And he had experience with a firm called AccuStaff, where they built a company like that to about $1.5 billion. And I didn't really see eye to eye with that strategy. I was kind of an operator and a builder and wanted to build culture and structure, et cetera. So he fired me. And there I was out on the street. I wasn't able to kind of build my access business consulting model within that company. But I decided then that this is a business that needed to be built. And so I squirreled myself away in my room and got my blankie and turned the lights out and sucked my thumb and pondered how I was going to do it. And the next thing you know, I was off to the races and running. I think our first year we did $5 million. The next year we did $14 million. The next year we did $31 million. The next year we did $40 million. We did another $40 million. We grew the company to $65 million. We actually won a big contract about 4 years ago and skyrocketed to $171 million. And that contract ended, and we went back to about $65 million. We bought a $50 million company because I was ready to start acquiring once we had established culture, et cetera, in our company. And that's where we sit today. And you've read my bio on what our service offerings are, et cetera. So here's something interesting. I started my career, see, I'm moving backwards now, remember, right? I started my career, graduated from Temple University. I started my career in 1980 at Price Waterhouse. It was not Price Waterhouse Coopers at the time, just Price Waterhouse. And at that time, I was really at the top of the earning chart from college graduates. I was offered $14,300 plus overtime. I worked there for 3 years and performed well. And of course, I've got good raises. So by the time I left, I was making $19,100 plus overtime. And this staffing company I told you that we took public, they had a very interesting job offer. They offered me $1,000 a year, $1,000 a month draw against commission. So, okay, $14,000, $19,000, $1,000 a month, which equates to $12,000 against draw. You know, Menachem, why would you bring a guy like that in front of me? Speak to these guys. Doesn't he know the numbers are supposed to go this way? Well, they were going the other way. But I had a vision. You know, I saw something that I believed. My company's name's Solomon Edwards, by the way. I have a logo that stands for the complete outsourced circle of outsourced services, which you could see, I hope. And it's actually shaped in a G, which stands for Gertrude, which was my grandmother. So I named this company in honor of my grandparents. And my grandmother had a very unique gift. She was able to size you up 10 seconds. She could look at you, maybe have 10 words with you, knew exactly who you were as a person, what your qualities were, etc. And I always admired that skill set and always strived to be able to be a good student of people. And I always felt that if you could be a good student of people, then you would succeed in whatever you did. And so here was this job as a headhunter, basically, to come into a staffing firm and match people. And if I was good at it, the average fee at the time was about $7,700. Today, the average fee at that level is about 21, 22,000 because of the increase in salaries and the percentages that the industry is kind of guided by. So I did a whole bunch of calculations because I was a CPA, for gosh sakes, and found out that if I made 1.5 placements a month, that I could make $35,000, which would be actually almost twice as much as what I was making. And so, and right now I'm in 1% territory here, okay? Remember, 1%ers are stupid. Let's keep that in mind, right? It makes no sense that you would do that. But they don't walk to the beat of the drum that everybody else does. And they see what others don't see. And I can tell you at the time, my colleagues at Price Waterhouse, many of whom I'm still friends with today, you know, said, why would you leave the prestigious halls of Price Waterhouse? And quite honestly, they were right, to go and become, you know, a headhunter. And a headhunter at that time, and maybe a little bit today, I don't know, had the connotation of a, you know, a used car sales person. Well, my interpretation of that would be, if that's who all the people are, that's their mindset and their mentality, that they're used car salesmen, then this is prime ground for me to step in if I treat people honestly and morally and care about the client getting the right person and have a real genuine interest in the health and well-being of the candidate. You got staffing guys, pay attention to that point. If you want to succeed, that's the way to do it. If I can step into that environment, then I ought to really explode, right? 250 consultants in the Romac franchise system that I was a part of nationally. In my third year, I was the #1 producer with that mindset. I made $45,000 in that first year, and I made nothing for the first 6 months. I just might add to that. We're also stubborn 1%ers. We tend not to give up, and we don't see obstacles until it's too late and we're in the middle. And so I pushed forward, made $45,000 that year, and I never made less than $100,000 thereafter. And I was in the top 10 producers in the country for the 10 years that I was on the desk, and #1 several times. All right, so now let me take you back to college, because remember, I'm working backwards, right? I started at Drexel University. I went to school at night because I'd taken 5 years off between high school and college, help out at home, and went back to school at night at Drexel to become a civil engineer. Did that for a year and said there's no way I could do this for 10 years and work, etc. So I quit. I went to Temple University, where I got a great education. I started out as a pre-med student, like every good Jewish boy. There were 220 people in my first biology class, you know, one of these auditorium type of things. We had an amazing professor. I learned a lot and completely loved what I was learning. The midterm came around. Out of 220 people, I was in the bottom 20 in terms of score. Bottom 20. I was astonished. But you know, one of the things I learned out of that was I learned how to learn. When you go back to school, you have to relearn how to learn stuff. So off I went to English and history. Of course, it's a likely appropriate change. And that led me to education. In fact, I student taught in the Philadelphia schools for 1 semester, where at that time, the inner city kids, they wanted to connect with the kids more. So it wasn't Mr. Baumstein or Mr. Jones or Mr. Schmidt. It was Mr. Menachem or Mr. Jim. Well, I knew teaching wasn't going to work with me because, for those of you a little bit older, you know, Mr. Ed doesn't quite cut it, right? So in my junior year, I panicked and decided that I needed to get a job where I could make some money, and went to work for, I went to get my degree in accounting, and I was able to succeed there and you know, graduate and be able to get into Price Waterhouse. But here's the interesting thing. Working my way through college, I started a painting business. Well, I had a waiter's job. I was a taxi driver. I worked at UPS for 3 weeks. Has anybody done the UPS job? How long did you last there?
1 summer.
Wow, you're a lot better man than I am, I'll tell you that. We don't have time, I won't go into the details of that job, but it was a nightmare. You'd agree with that, right? They have a system on how to abuse people very successfully. But I ended up with a little painting business, and by the time I had graduated, I had a couple of contracts with some apartment buildings. I had 3 or 4 guys working for me, and in 1980, I made $50,000. All right, so let's recount the compensation history again, shall we? $50,000 when I graduate, 14.3 plus overtime, 19.1 $1,000 draw against commission, right? You either have to be stupid here, or you have to see something different than what's in front of you and where you're going and what you want to do, right? I looked at some of the guys that were that I had hired, and they were 50, 55-year-old guys, and their arms were kind of creaky and dried out from the paint fumes, and their noses were red from, you know, drinking themselves to sleep. And I said, you know what? I don't want to look like that when I'm that age. So I mentioned that I mentioned that again going backwards. I mentioned I took 5 years off between high school and college. Now I'm originally from Montreal, and the Jewish community in Montreal is a little bit different than the American Jewish community here. The Jewish community is broken up into 2 groups. What I would call upper middle class group, educated, refined, etc., and dirt poor and unaccomplished. My father came from the dirt poor side of the tracks, and my mother came from the more refined side of the tracks. Now, ironically, my dad will have passed away 25 years ago in about a week, which is just amazing to me and my brothers. We were talking about that. My dad probably had 26 jobs in his life, from bread delivery to milkman to full of brush salesperson, if any of you even know what that job is. Some do, to taxi driver. He was, and I say this with affection, he was kind of like an Archie Bunker type. You know, he'd get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. He wasn't the brightest guy in the world. He'd work 12, 13 hours in a day that he probably could have done in 8 hours. He'd come home and sit on his couch and, you know, fall asleep watching All in the Family. My mom was a devoted housewife. In fact, they were married, I think, 43 years. My father dropped dead of a heart attack when he was 62. She's 90, by the way, and thriving, I'll say. They met on a blind date, were engaged 3 weeks later, married 3 months after that, and were totally in love for those 43 years that they were together. It's a great story. Now, my grandparents, who I named the company for, were not very happy with my mother on this situation here. And so my father moved to Philadelphia to get away from his in-laws. That's why I'm here. You can blame them. My grandparents countered by building a summer cottage in Laurentian Mountains, where there was about 24, 25 families around the lake. And we would go there every summer till I was about 16 years old. And while the other kids were around the lake were having fun, going swimming and boating and fishing, and I did all those things. But I would, at 8 years old, bring logs in for the fireplace that were dumped in the driveway for a neighbor and put them underneath. I'd be the guy that ran a carnival for the kids when I was 9, taking plastic bowling pins and dropping clothespins into milk bottles. And and doing things like that. And interestingly, I made a little money, but really gave the whole community something to do because we were all bored to tears, right? And, you know, kind of isolated there around the lake. When I moved to Philadelphia, how many know where Broad and Olney is, right? Everybody knows where that is, right? Well, there used to be a movie theater called the Esquire Theater, right? Everybody remember the Esquire Theater? And going to the movies was a big deal. And back in those days, I was probably 8 or 9, and the movies probably cost a dime to go to, and candy might have been a nickel. But I can tell you that I was so dirt poor that literally relatives had to take groceries to our house every once in a while so we would have food to eat. Now, some of you guys don't have any idea about what that experience is like. I do. When my grandmother came to visit us at Christmas time, she would do 2 things. She would take us to the dentist, where we would have 5 or 6 cavities filled, because my parents weren't either economically or astute enough, aware enough to say, okay, we got to get these kids and get their teeth filled. This next stop would be to take us to the department store where we'd buy a winter coat so that we would have warm clothes to wear. So the reason why I decided to take the story from front to end is because it dawned on me a few years ago that it took me 50 years to become an overnight success. Right? 50 years to become an overnight success. And each one of you, you don't know the journey that you've taken, right? I'm no better served to stand up here and talk to you about anything than you are to come up yourself and tell us your story, because you don't know another man until you've walked inside his shoes. And you don't know the journey that one takes. I'll close with just a very interesting story. And Menachem, I think you wanted me to offer questions. I mean, I don't know what you'd want to ask, but we're running out of time, so I'll give a couple minutes if anybody has anything, and I'll stick around if you want to talk to me. My father had a brother who was mentally ill. We were from Montreal, okay? So if you wanted to come to the U.S. And you were mentally ill, you weren't allowed to. It was against the immigration laws. And my father looked after his brother, and his brother lived in apartment to apartment to apartment. He was independently living, but he would have to move every 3 to 6 months because it would take that long for the neighbors to find out he was crazy, right? And so he would call my dad, and sometimes he'd be on the phone with him for an hour and a half, 2 hours, just crying, you know, and lamenting his life. And my dad would be on the phone with him. You got to remember, we were dirt poor, okay? So we'd get a telephone bill back at those years in the 70s for $140, right? Our rent wasn't that much. But my father did that, and so I promised at my father's gravesite that I would take care of my uncle and step in my father's shoes, and saw that he was okay. And I fulfilled that. I fulfilled that obligation to him. And I can tell you that my uncle used to come to the U.S. and spend a week or 2 with us. And at 8, 9, 10 years old, he was a complete embarrassment, because in those days the psychology was, if you're feeling anger or if you have any bitterness, you have to get it out, right? Because if you hold it in, you know, it's just going to rot you, so you got to get it out. So it's a true story. We get on the bus. My uncle put $1 in for the fare, and or 75 cents, and the driver would say, "Yo, buddy," it's Philadelphia. "Yo, it's $1 now." And my uncle would go into a tirade of which words I can't repeat here. Vulgar, awful things at the top of his lungs, the kind where everybody else on the bus just kind of turns like this, right? And I kind of grew up, kind of saying, oh, look at those people. I never want to be like that. I never want to act, be around folks like that, and I'm stronger and bigger and better, and yada, yada, yada. Well, when my uncle died about 5 or 6 years ago, 7 or 8 years ago actually now, at his grave I said, all those years that I kind of took care of you and you were in my life, my whole life, I was embarrassed by you and ashamed of you and never thought much of anything that you had or you had to contribute. And I realized at that moment that the greatest lesson that I had ever gotten in life was from my uncle. Because my uncle taught me about compassion and how to care for others. And we all are thrown the same kind of obstacles in life. Some of us don't have the fortitude, the inner fortitude, to be able to work through those things, as many of you in this room are blessed to be able to do. And it made me realize for the first time that people are different, and they all behave differently. And for those of us that are blessed with good health, with good jobs, and the ability to take care of ourselves, it dawned on me that it's time to look out after others and see the kind of impact we could have in others. And I'll close by saying that one of the reasons why I so admire Menachem and the JHP program, which I ardently ask you to support, is, as you might know, Menachem looks a little different than most other people, right? He's got his long... It depends on where you are. But in the secular world where you've decided to play, Menachem has reached out into the next generation of our children. And in the secular world, he doesn't ask them to come to a Chabad meeting. He doesn't ask them to wrap tefillin. He throws a beer pong party for them, which I've attended. Right? I lost. But what he's done is he's reached out to our young people, our generation. And this is a networking meeting, right? So there are young professionals here that need and want your guidance. They're trying to figure out how to make an impact on this world. They're trying to figure out how to be 1%ers. We have lots of knowledge. The rest of us. It's time for us to step outside of ourselves and reach down to the Jewish community underneath us. I won't say much about this, but Menachem said he took 21 people to Israel, of which 16 of them are married. I think 3 of them got married met each other on the trip, right? 3 couples? Right. Well, I'm on my own mission to get my kids married off, and I'm taking a small trip to Israel to get started, and I'm taking a few kids with me, and I'm more than happy to make matches, because remember, that was part of my skill set early on.
Well, you got some takers back here.
I'm already taking them. In fact, I'm going in about 3 weeks, 4 weeks. We're going to take a trip to Israel. But here's the point, though. Those of you that are over 50 in this room, turn around and reach out to the young people here. They need your help. They need the guidance. They need direction. You have so much wisdom to offer them. You have so many bumps and bruises of experience that brought you to a place of success. Help them avoid some of the pitfalls. Okay. And I think on that note, I'll say thank you so much for having me. I hope you got something out of what I said.